We got a lot to cover this hour. We're going to take a turn now to the trade war, which may be over or on pause for now. And it has one group of people, market participants, feeling optimistic. After the opening, the Dow was up 400 points. That's about 1.6%. Here's a look at where it is now, up 250 on the day. And oil prices got a bit of a rebound. Crude rising 4% on the news of a temporary reprieve from the U.S.-China trade conflict. The president, of course, had threatened to raise tariffs on another $200 billion worth of Chinese goods by January 1st. But that plan was put on hold when the two met at the G20 summit in Argentina. President Trump tweeting this claim that President Xi agreed to, quote, reduce and remove tariffs on cars coming into China from the U.S. But here's the thing. We have seen no announcement to that effect or anything like it by the Chinese. While closer to home, the president, along with his Canadian and Mexican counterparts, signed the newly branded United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, which is an update, basically NAFTA 2.0. And even as the president threatened to terminate the existing free trade agreement because he's looking to put pressure on Congress to ratify the new one, while all of this happened, members of his own party are cautioning that we need to let the updated version of USMCA get approved from all three countries.
I think we should see it if we can get it passed first, and I'm going to see how many Democrat votes come on board for this.
Joining me now, Brendan Greeley, U.S. editor of the Financial Times Alphaville, and Politico's chief economic correspondent, Ben White. All right, gentlemen, I want to start with this. They're just putting this thing on hold. Brendan, to you first. It's not like they have a trade agreement in place. And even though we only have limited information, from what we know, China is on the same path they always were. And in fact, the concession they're offering now, they offered the White House months ago, and the White House said, not good enough, give me something better.
Yeah, Steph, we're looking at two separate problems. One problem is the original problem with China and trade, which is that they subsidize industries very heavily with cheap credit. They either steal outright or force companies to share their most important technology. That hasn't really changed, right? That problem remains. Then we had a problem on top of that, which is that financial markets were uncertain about what was going to happen as the U.S. and China escalated tariffs. So we've kind of solved problem number two. We haven't really addressed problem number one. So if we go back to that, the concession that China offered in Buenos Aires was basically, we're going to continue buying stuff we don't really care to make at home. We're going to continue buying soybeans and crude oil and some industrial products. That's not our strategy anyway. So it wasn't really a concession.
Then stay on that, Ben. To that exact point, China has been looking to upgrade, move up the food chain all along. So the quote that the White House put out, that China would be importing very substantial amounts of energy, agriculture, and industrial products. To exactly what Brendan said, China already said, fine, we don't want to make those things, we'll import them. What they're trying to do is make their own planes, electric cars. Planes were the highest value item they were importing last year, and that's not going to change. Right. Does the president see that this is right in line with what China's strategy was all along?
I mean, I think he probably does see it. And obviously, they're happy to buy our soybeans. They're happy to buy the rest of this stuff that they were going to buy anyway. So this is not, as Brendan said, really a concession on their part. The biggest things that China's trying to do is, as you say, upgrade their technology, upgrade their ability to build high-value manufactured items. And to do that, they've engaged in a lot of practices that the world doesn't like, that we don't like, which is forced technology transfer, which is intellectual property theft. Somehow now, in the next 90 days, we have to get them to make fundamental concessions on those things that are part of their broad overarching economic plan. That is going to be extraordinarily hard to do, hence markets opening up 400, now 250, people realizing this is going to be very difficult. We have punted the ball down the road, which is fine. Great, we're not going to 25% on January 1, but nothing is solved here. And the things that we're trying to solve, China does not want to give in on. So we've got another big deadline coming up, and markets will be very worried about it when we hit that deadline.
Then, Brendan, whether it's the market's up 400 or 200, it's still in the green. Is that because, kicking the can down the road is sort of like no news is good news? It didn't get any worse over the weekend, so that's better from the market?
Well, remember, there are two problems, right? The first problem is the way China trades. The second problem is the tariff war we happen to have right now. There was a ton of political pain for the president involved in the tariff war, right? We were seeing soybean prices in the U.S. plummet. We were seeing farmers unable to even get their crops out of the field, plowing them under, right? And we saw markets uncertain about what was going to happen next, dropping. So now we've reduced some of that uncertainty. So we have two pieces of political pain that the president was experiencing are now off the table. Markets are happy. Farmers are happy. So has that solved the original problem? No, but it has solved the problem that the president created about a year ago.
But we saw Peter Navarro, right? Peter Navarro has been by the president's side throughout the campaign on trade. Then President Trump won, and Gary Cohn said, get Navarro out of the White House, and he relegated him over to work with Wilbur Ross. Navarro has now made this announcement that U.S. Trade Rep Lighthizer is going to be in charge with talks with China. That is a big deal, because if you remember when there was that surprise meeting when Wilbur Ross and Navarro kind of snuck their way into the White House and got the president to agree to a meeting the following day with CEOs from the aluminum and steel industry, that meeting no one knew about, that was just Navarro and Wilbur Ross. Lighthizer was on the other side of the table. Right. Is it a positive in terms of you feeling a level of confidence that something will get done with Lighthizer in the room rather than Navarro?
Right. Well, yes, Lighthizer rather than Navarro. Navarro being a intense China hawk, wanting to completely reorder the way the U.S. economy works and reshore all this manufacturing that's gone to China. Bob Lighthizer does not share that view, but he also is a very tough China negotiator. I think there are two ways to interpret that move. One is that Trump wants to take somewhat of a hard line in these negotiations and get real concessions from China. But the other is that Lighthizer is a pro. I mean, he's done these kind of negotiations for a long time. If you want your person in there who can actually put together a document that says the Chinese are going to do all of these things, that's who you want. You don't necessarily want Stephen Mnuchin to be the lead on that, because Lighthizer has the experience. But this is the overarching thematic of the entire Trump presidency. The hardline anti-free traders like Navarro, like Lighthizer to a degree, like Steve Bannon, pushing Trump to be incredibly hard and go with tariffs and not worry about the markets. And then the Kudlows and the Mnuchins who care about market reaction and do not want to see, a tank on Wall Street, and so push him towards making deals. At some point over these 90 days, one of those two sides is going to win out in this ultimate fight, and we're either going to get a deal or we're going to get another real big sell-off on Wall Street.
Okay, but maybe could one argue that strategy works? Brendan, we could say that the USMCA is really just NAFTA 2.0. They didn't do much, but they did something. And NAFTA 2.0 is better than the NAFTA we had several months ago. So is this possibly going to be a winning strategy? Because NAFTA 2.0 is likely going to pass.
I would call it NAFTA 1.1, but I take your point. Yes, it is an improvement.
Okay, I get it.
Sure.
1.1, not 2.0, but 1.1 is still more than 1.
Yeah, and I also think that we should credit Peter Navarro for, being a hawk within the administration. I don't agree with the way the administration is negotiating. That said, I wish that any other administration over the last 20 years had shown some of the resolve, if that's the right word to use, that this administration has shown. And one of the things you read from China watchers is that China is a little rattled. They haven't really met this kind of objection before. So I don't know whether this.
It is that unpredictability, Brendan, that works in the president's favor. China loved the fact that the Obama administration was completely predictable to them. The fact that they don't know which direction President Trump could go in actually helps us.
I think that's possible. I think the Obama administration was much more of a Mnuchin administration. They did do stuff on the edges, on the margins. They did try to get China to curb some of its worst practices. But again, I do credit the administration for calling out China openly and consistently. I do wish that they'd done a better job of bringing other countries on board so that we weren't alone in this. But increasingly, we're not. Germany is frustrated with China's trade policies, too.
And Ben, you know who else credits the president with that? A lot of people who've been directly hurt. We've seen people in manufacturing. We've seen farmers who've said, I will take this short-term pain because the president is at least taking this head on. And we've been in the hurt locker for years.
Yeah, I think the ultimate thing is NAFTA is not done yet. NAFTA 1.1 or 2.0, whatever you want to call it, still has to get approved by Congress. Democrats are not totally on board with that. Maybe there are changes. Trump has said he'll pull out entirely. That would be very damaging for the U.S. economy and for farmers. China, not yet done. Clearly correct that he's taken a harder line and maybe gotten the Chinese rattled and to make some changes. If he accomplishes that, great. If he does get NAFTA over the finish line, great. But let's not give him full credit yet for having made these changes, because they are not in existence yet.
Not yet. All right, Ben, Brendan, thank you so much. Always important to talk trade.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.